Welcome to Faith Point, the podcast ministry of First Southern Baptist Church of Prescott Valley, with Senior Pastor Terrell Eldredge. Our goal is to allow our faith to intersect with real life. So let's join Pastor Terrell today as he shares with us from God's Word.
When you came in a little while ago, you received a gift. And so I'd like you to get that out right now if you don't have it out. It's a 4-inch nail. And I want you to just kind of look at it while I'm talking a little bit here. I want you to feel it, grip it, weigh it, maybe push it against the point, against your palm, or maybe against your wrist just a little bit to feel the prick there that it would give to you. I want you to just kind of hang on to that this morning as we talk about some things, because this nail that I gave to you is not all that much different than the one that was used to nail Jesus to the cross 2,000 years ago, the nails that were used. They would have been maybe about 2 or 3 inches longer than this 4-inch nail. They would have been somewhere between 6.5, 7.5, maybe 8 inches. They would have been a little thicker, with maybe a little bit duller point on it, more similar perhaps to a railroad nail that you might think about, but served the same purpose. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to be a pastor down in Southern California. We were there for 19 years at a church in Santee, and there were times over 19 years, just like here, where there were a lot of construction type of projects that went on and fixing things. And so there were those times when, excuse me just a minute here, to get some of my, got to check some of my things that I have in here. Oh yes, I do have a hammer. Okay, good. We'd have to bring our hammers down. This hammer I've got several, but this one's really special to me because it's painted and it says Papa on that. And my oldest grandson, who's now in 8th grade, when he was a preschooler, painted that either in Sunday school or VBS or in preschool, and sent that to me or gave that to me. And so it sits in my office, and many of you have maybe seen it sitting on one of the bookshelves. And I don't use it for much at all. And in case you're wondering, I didn't come to pound on the pulpit today to act more like a fire and brimstone pastor and preacher today. That's not my intent. But I would bring a hammer down, not unlike this one, and then we would do some work. And so most of us knew how to swing a hammer a little bit, and we would kind of make attempts of driving nails and those kinds of things. But there was one guy who was a professional carpenter, like some of you, Jim. And Jim was a master carpenter, and he did things with his hammer that the rest of us could only stand back and say, "Wow, how'd you get that done so fast and so well?" And for example, if I were to take this nail and try to drive it through this wood, I could do that, but it would probably take me about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 swings at the nail to get it all the way through and to get it driven all the way down. Now Jim, he would just set it up. He would hit it once, and the second time it would be done. It could be a 6-inch nail, and it would be the same thing. I could go up on the roof and tack a few things down, a few loose shingles down perhaps. Jim could build whatever you need built. And we would see that. I would know the difference in the work that he was doing. He would know the difference too. He would say, "Would you like me to come and do that now?" He would understand how much agony I was in, especially my thumb, from hitting it more often than I hit the nail. But that's how it was. That's true of a lot of things in life, isn't it? For example, I'm not a great basketball fan. I never was good at it, partly because you have to be able to jump, and I'm no good at that, and partly because you have to be coordinated. I'm just barely good at that. And so if you could put a Spalding NBA basketball in my hand, I bought this one at Walmart. It costs just under $19. It says it's a Spalding. It has the NBA logo on it because that's what NBA uses, is Spalding basketballs. I think they pay a little more than $18, $19 for the basketballs that they've used in the games. I think there's something more in about $225 a basketball or so that they pay. But you could put an $18.95 basketball in my hand, or it's a $225 basketball in my hand, or you could put it in the hand of, let's say, LeBron James. Now, a basketball, even though it's an NBA regulation basketball, it costs $225. In my hand, it's still worth $225. You put it in the hand of LeBron James, and it's worth $245 million over a 4-year period. That's about $35 million a year. No, more than that. It's a lot of money. It's unbelievable. However, as much as I don't really like basketball, I do really enjoy baseball. No good at it still, but I enjoy it. And, if you were to take a baseball, a Rawlings baseball, that are used by Major League Baseball, which this is a Rawlings, but it's not one like they would use. Costs about $2.50 at Walmart, but the ones they use are going to cost more, like about $75. And then they don't use aluminum bats. They use wooden bats, and the most popular brand is the Louisville Slugger, and that's going to cost you around $250. I didn't want to spend $250 on a bat just to show it to you today. You can imagine this being that. But if you gave me a wooden Louisville Slugger and an official baseball, that would be somewhere in the range of about $300 of value. But if you were to take that same bat and put it in the hand of Bryce Harper, it would be worth $330 million over the next 13 years. That's a big difference, isn't it? I do enjoy golf, don't really like watching it. But I didn't bring any golf clubs with me today. But Barbara, a few weeks ago, I don't know why, but on Sunday afternoon, she made the comment, because I think that one of the majors had just finished, and she said, if you had just studied golf for 7 years in college and seminary, life would be a whole lot different for us right now. I didn't even know she was paying attention. Take that same golf club that you could put in my hand that maybe would cost, let's say my putter would cost maybe about $100. Put it in the hand of someone like Tiger Woods or some of the other greats that are out there, and it would be worth very different. Tiger Woods won the Masters back in April, and won over $1.5 million to play on just for playing 4 rounds of golf. It makes a difference whose hand it's in, doesn't it? You could take this nail, put it in my hand, and it's probably just worth a few pennies. And what I could do with it would not be very much. But you take that same nail and you put it in the hand of Jesus. And you know what happened? In the hand of Jesus, it rocked our world and changed eternity. Today we're talking about He chose the nails. We're talking about what happened on the cross 2,000 years ago when Jesus said, I will choose the nail. The Romans are the ones who put Jesus to death, and we're all aware of that. But you realize that the Romans had had 3 different ways of executing condemned prisoners, and they were very specific about what they used. The most honorable way that they executed somebody was with the sword by decapitation. And we think, well, that doesn't sound very appealing. But it was the most honorable. According to tradition, that's how the Apostle Paul was executed. It's also how John the Baptist died, as well as James, the brother of John. The second way a criminal was executed was by burning them alive. And again, we think, well, that doesn't sound appealing at all. That sounds very painful. And as horrible as it is to imagine, the Romans believed it was more humane than death on the cross. That gives us some idea of the agony that Jesus endured on the cross. If you were one condemned to die, like Jesus of Nazareth was, to die on the cross, your final day of life on earth began with that brutal beating that Jesus endured. Many times the prisoners or those condemned to death died during that beating. After you were beaten, you were mocked. After you were mocked, you were stripped naked and humiliated, and finally you were nailed to that cross while you were still alive. I want you to try to imagine that while that was happening, your family, your neighbors, your friends were there watching. They were watching you go through that. Try to imagine watching something as awful as that happening to your father or your brother, your husband, your son. That's what Jesus endured on the cross. In Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 and 14, the key passages, the key verses for today, this is what the Apostle Paul told the Christians at Colossae. When you were dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your sinful nature, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all of our sins, having canceled the written code with its regulations that was against us and that stood opposed to us. He took it away, nailing it to the cross. When Paul wrote this passage of Scripture to the Colossae church, he was indicating that Jesus was nailed to the cross completely powerless. However, he came down from the cross all powerful. I want you to notice what was accomplished. Because Jesus chose the nails, what was accomplished? The first thing that was accomplished was that people who were dead in sin were made alive. Because Jesus died in our place, we were made alive in Him. The second thing that was accomplished was the written code against us was canceled. And it was nailed to the cross. It was canceled. And then all the charges were taken down and nailed to the cross. Now the terminology that the Apostle Paul uses is interesting. He makes both a legal and financial reference. And you may not realize that, but that's exactly what he's done in these 2 verses. He says, first of all, that there was a written code. That written code represented the list of charges that were stated in a court of law against a criminal condemned to die. So just like today, you're not put to death legally by the state without some kind of a judgment against you. And the same thing was true in Jesus' day. And so it was written down, it was stated, it's why he was going to die. And in the ancient world, in Jesus' day, those charges were written on a small plaque, and they were nailed to the cross above the criminal's head. And that was that legal reference. Then he makes a financial reference. He says that he forgave all your sins. Financially, in the ancient world, if a debtor could not pay a debt, the amount due was written down and charged against him. And then that man was thrown into debtor's prison and remained there until the debt was settled. And that debt was either put on his door of his house, that was nailed to his door, or it was nailed above the prison door, knowing that that's why he was there. And those 2 thoughts illuminate this beautiful chorus from that old Southern gospel hymn that we've probably heard a million times. He paid a debt he did not owe. And you can see it there in your notes. It says, he paid a debt he did not owe. I owed a debt I could not pay. I needed someone to wash my sins away. And now I sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace, all day long. Jesus paid a debt I could never pay. Think about that. If you were thrown into that debtor's prison, how would you ever pay the debt? You couldn't. We were in a debtor's prison, but Jesus paid the debt we couldn't pay. In just a moment, we're going to experience this time of communion, the Lord's Supper. The elements, the bread, the juice are there waiting for us on the table in front of me. But before we celebrate, we have to understand that we have nothing to celebrate. We have no joy at all apart from the power of the fact that Jesus chose the nail. Jesus chose the nails. Many of you have seen the movie The Passion. The director chose not to show the face of the man who takes the mallet and the hammer and the nails and drives them into the hands and the feet of Jesus. All one sees in that movie are these strong, brawny hands of the soldier gripping the hammer and then driving it down. It wasn't until later on, after the movie had been released, that it was revealed that the actor swinging the hammer was actually the director himself, Mel Gibson. The only place he shows up in the movie is just his hands. I think Mel Gibson understood what we've got to understand today. It was his sins that nailed Jesus to the cross. We have to understand that it is our sins. It is my sins that nailed Jesus to that cross. In a minute, we're going to be taking the bread. The last meal Jesus ate before going to the cross was a Passover meal with his disciples. At that point, for some 1,500 years, the Jewish people had been remembering the night the angel of the Lord passed over their homes in Egypt. The meal was comprised of these really strange recipes and flavors, but they were all designed to teach a lesson of the care and protection of God. For example, there was salt water in the meal that reminded them of the tears that they had shed in 400 years of slavery in Egypt. There were bitter herbs that reminded them of the harsh life that they had led during those 400 years. But there were also fruit paste and cinnamon. What were those remembering? Those were a reminder of the bricks that they had built for 400 years. And then there was the lamb. The lamb reminded them of the sacrifice of blood that saved their firstborn son or male of the household from death. And then there was that flatbread made without leaven, reminding them of the haste in which they had to leave Egypt and the purity of which God called them to lead their lives. In Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, we find written, "Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians." The Passover meal was really a recipe designed and developed to invite people to taste and see that the Lord is good. It was for the Jews, taste and see that the Lord is good. Psalm 34:8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." But friends, it is also for us today to taste and see that the Lord is good. We sang about that a little while ago, that we've tasted his grace, because God is good. that night Jesus took time to infuse a centuries-old tradition of the Passover meal with a new life and new meaning. And that's what we recall today. This is not about us trying to be Jewish, because we're not. It is not about us trying to do what the Jews did 2,000 years ago, because we're not. Jesus said this is about something new, something that we need to be reminded of. This communion is a call to understand that following Jesus is a serious business, and that nothing less than His own body was required that we might have everlasting life. You remember that Jesus, after He'd hung on the cross for 6 hours, cried out in John 19:30, we read about it, "Tetelestai," Jesus said, just one word. Tetelestai. Most of you know what that means, I believe. It means it is finished. Jesus cried out, "It is finished." Not that He was finished, not that God was done, but that the reason that He had come, the work that He had come to do, was finished. He was stating that at long last the requirements of a holy God for payment of sin had been met, that people dead in their sins now had new life. The work of Jesus had been sent to do was now complete, and all that was made possible because of the power of the nails. It hinged on those nails. Jesus could have decided, I'm not going to do that. I am not going to choose the nails. But we would not be here today had He done that. It hinged on the power of the nails in Jesus' decision. But we'll also be taking the cup in a few moments. In that Passover meal, there were 4 cups of wine that were taken throughout the meal. Again, reminding them of the promises and reminding them that God is good, that we can taste and see. That night, as Jesus had broken the bread, He took the cup. And He said in Luke chapter 22, verse 20, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." You see, the rule for an acceptable sacrifice had always been made clear. And the writer of Hebrews said in Hebrews 9:22, "Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness." That's the rule. The Jews knew that. That unless something dies, sin can't be erased. And so for 1,500 years, they had sacrificed animals. But it never completely erased their guilt. It never took care of the sin problem. Jesus became the sacrificial lamb, and it opened the way. When Jesus died, that veil that separated God from mankind in the innermost part of the temple was torn apart from top to bottom because the blood of Jesus was shed on that cross. There's an old story about 2 successful brothers who had once been very close but had a falling out. And though their land was adjacent to one another, they hadn't spoken to one another in years. One of the brothers decided to hire a carpenter. And when the carpenter came, he said, "I want to explain what I want you to do." He said, he went on to tell about how in recent days his brother had bulldozed a levee and held back a creek of water. And once that levee was in place, it was down, the meadow standing between their 2 lands was filled with water. And it infuriated this brother. And so he asked the carpenter, he said, I have a lot of lumber in my barn. I want you to go and I want you to build a tall fence at least 8 feet high so I never have to look over at my brother's property again. I never want to see his face again. Carpenter agreed to do it. And the man who'd hired him left on a business trip. When he got back from his business trip, he was anxious to see he was anxious to get there and to see the wall, the fence had been built. When he got there, sure enough, the carpenter was just cleaning up after himself. He'd finished the job. Had a really pleased look on his face. Brother looked over, though, and he saw that the man had not built a fence at all. He'd used the lumber from the barn and built a beautiful bridge across the pond, connecting their properties once again. He was angry with the carpenter. I mean, he was just spitting angry. And he started to give him what for, and suddenly he noticed coming running across the bridge was a man. It was his brother. He stopped in the middle of trying to berate this carpenter, watched his brother run right up to him. His brother looked at him and said, "Brother, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for the way I've treated you. I have treated you wrong. I have done you wrong for years. And look what you've done. You built a bridge." And he hugged his brother. And they had a restored relationship. That's what Jesus did when he went to the cross. He didn't build a wall. The wall already existed. The wall was already there. It separates us from God. We built the wall. It's our sin that did that. Jesus went to the cross. He built a bridge. A bridge between a holy God and broken humanity. A God who said, "I love you, but you've chosen sin over a relationship with me. And you could not pay the debt. And so I let my son Jesus become the sacrificial lamb who paid the debt and did what we could not do. And today, friends, we have a relationship with a Father who loves us that we chose to be estranged from. But today, through Jesus Christ, we have fellowship with. This morning, your need may not be to sit at the Lord's Supper table. Your need may be to know the one it represents. To say yes to Jesus. To say yes to the salvation that he offers. To say yes to the grace that he gives. To say yes to being able to be bridged together through him with a holy God who loves us. Let's pray together. Father,
thank you for joining us today for Faith Point. Reach us online at firstsouthernpv.org or stop by to worship with us if you are in the Prescott Valley area. May God richly bless you today as you allow your faith to intersect with your life.